Hi, I'm Andy Jefferson, lead designer of Cellvival and head of Asset's video game project.
And hello, I'm Dave Syracuse, a local science teacher working with Asset to develop and pilot modules.
In this video, we're going to walk through the tutorial and part of a level to help familiarize you with Cellvival so you can feel confident using it with your students. We'll talk about both its controls and how the game works, and hopefully point out any items that might cause problems as you go along. If you want to know more about a specific topic covered in this video, here's a list of topics and time codes, so you can pause the video here and jump to that segment.
When you open up the game, you'll see the main menu first. Point out to the students that on the right, they'll see the level selector buttons. Clicking on them will move between the available levels.
We strongly encourage you to start with the tutorial for students who have not played the game before.
Do make sure that you verify that all students have tutorials selected before proceeding. Students have a penchant for moving ahead, and the tutorial, unlike some other games, really does provide useful information.
The other buttons on the left provide more information. The option button provides the ability to mute the game if necessary. There aren't any particularly loud noises, and there is some good swimming music in the background, but if many students are playing the game at one time in a computer lab, things could get somewhat loud.
The Codex is a very useful screen. Students are able to access all this information from the game, but they may benefit from taking a look at it before they start. When you click this button, you'll get a key to all the things that you'll be able to see in the game.
And each of them has an entry with a picture and more information that provides both information that's useful in-game, like how predators behave, and interesting information about them in the real world, to try and scaffold building interest about these organisms. The Codex lists predators of Tetrahymena, its prey, and other abiotic and biotic environmental factors that students may encounter in the game.
The final button on the left lists those who have been instrumental in creating the game. Not too interesting, but a great way to show students that there are lots of different ways to be involved in a science project. For example, we have psychologists, programmers, musicians, artists, science teachers, and researchers all working together on the final product. All the music and a great deal of the art was done at students at high schools around Cornell University. The Go button starts the game. Again, make sure that all students are beginning with the tutorial, then have them click Go.
This is the Tetrahymena cell you're controlling in the game. The camera is centered on it, so it will always be at the center of the screen. The goal of the game is for your line of Tetrahymena to survive as long as possible, and the best way to do that is by catching prey until you have enough energy to reproduce while avoiding getting eaten by predators.
Navigation is very easy. The cell always tries to face the cursor, and if you click and hold the left mouse button, the cell will swim toward it, so you can drag the cursor across the screen to swim along. The Tetrahymena cell will follow the cursor. Students will notice that the degree of control they have over the cell, that is, how easy it is to stop, start, or change direction, may not be very good. This is to be expected. Many students describe trying to control the cell as like trying to drive a hovercraft. It takes a bit of time to turn or reverse direction. This can change later on in the game as students help their cells evolve. And you can see the camera zoom in and out as your speed changes to help you see where you're going and to give some sense of how fast you're going.
Now let's hit the spacebar to pause the game, which is a very useful tool we'll talk about more in a minute. Right now we want to use it to talk about this food right here. These smaller bacteria are food that provide energy. Okay, so now we've eaten the bacteria, and that's given us some energy. This is the energy meter. Note how when you eat it, it goes up. And note to eat the bacteria, we have to line it up with the oral apparatus, the mouth, or it bounces off. The cell can't simply swim over it.
This may be aggravating to some students, but it reflects the reality of how a cell must feed in an actual pond. At this point, consider reminding students that Tetrahymena have no eyes, so they must rely on their sense of chemotaxis, or the ability to sense the concentration of certain chemicals in order to locate food and orient themselves in the proper way. When we eat enough, the meter is full, and the reproduce button appears. When you click the reproduce button, it takes us to the reproduction screen.
After the first few generations of the tutorial and in all the other levels, the students will be able to choose how they reproduce, either sexually or asexually. For the tutorial, they're forced to pick asexual reproduction first. Any changes that happen in asexual reproduction are largely random, so we give the players some ability to bias mutation, but they have very little control. Now, to explain what they have control of, let's talk about these traits. Tetrahymena in Cellvival have 4 traits: move speed, maneuverability, hazard resistance, or how much environmental toxins affect you, and metabolism, or how much energy you get from what you eat. Now these traits are set up in opposing pairs, so for example, if you become faster, you are also less maneuverable, which we represent by being closer to speed and moving away from maneuverability. Your cell starts in the middle, balanced between everything, but you can change its traits by reproducing. The spinner gives students some choice about which direction they'd like to go, but as we said, it's largely random. And we produced these possible offspring, so now you choose which to play as by clicking on it.
And now one of the cells swims off, and we're playing as a member of that new generation, with the new traits trying to survive. It's useful to point out to students that asexual reproduction will produce more cells, while sexual reproduction produces fewer cells. The students will continue to eat food, and when the energy meter is full again, clicking the reproduce button this time will get you back to the reproduction screen, but the tutorial will force you to select sexual reproduction. However, make sure to point out to the students that they can and need to use the up or down buttons to select a mate.
The window on the right shows the current mate, and you can use the arrow buttons to scroll through other possible mates. The graph on the right shows the different characteristics of those potential mates, which will influence your offspring if you choose to mate with them. Make sure students don't just immediately click the sexual button, but actually scroll through to select an appropriate mate. Once students find a mate with traits they think will be advantageous, then they can click the sexual button to mate. The traits of their cell and the partner cell will be combined, and students will be prompted to select another offspring cell to control.
The students can continue eating more food, and this time when they reproduce, you get the full reproduction interface you'll see for the rest of the game.
You get to choose if you want to reproduce asexually or sexually, and there's a nice big graph of your cell line's history. As we said, you always start in the middle with a balanced cell, and then these points represent the cells from the generation since then, when we asexually and then sexually reproduced. So this graph lets you track how your cell has changed and reflect on how the traits you had during previous generations were helpful or not when trying to survive in this environment.
Many students will find that they desire more control as opposed to speed, so they'll asexually reproduce to try and guide their cell in that direction. When in the other levels, however, when predators are present, some students will find that speed may be more important for survival. This is instructive to point out as a model of how the environment can shape organisms. When the tutorial concludes, a button that says Next Level will appear. Encourage your students to keep eating and go through a couple more rounds of mating until they can clearly see what the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction are, and the benefits or detriments of each. Ask them how the environment may have shaped their decisions. They can also pause the game and click the history button to see what changes they made in their cell.
In fact, let's take a minute to talk about what you can do while you've paused the game, either with the space bar or by clicking the pause button over here. The H button will show you the history of your cell as it reproduces and changes characteristics. The question mark returns you to the Codex for reference. And the gear gives you options to mute the game if you wish. The menu button will quit the current game and return you to the main menu. While the game's paused, it's also much easier to mouse over items in the screen to reveal more information about them. Now, mousing over any item will bring up its name even when the game isn't paused. But for smaller or more quickly moving items, such as the food bacteria, it's much easier to right-click on them when the game is paused. Right-clicking will bring you to the appropriate entry in the Codex so you can get more information about the item without having to search through it.
There are no predators in the tutorial, so students can take their time to learn about how the cell works. If you're projecting your screen for the students to see, it's a good idea to explicitly demonstrate pausing the game to read information in the Codex, and also point out that students can easily pause the game at any point to get more information.
While we have it paused, you may have also noticed this meter at the bottom left part of the screen. It shows the cells that are currently in your population, the other tetrahymena in the environment. The green cell is the one that the student controls, and the purple ones, if more than one cell is present, are cells controlled by the computer.
When this icon of a cell undergoing mitosis appears, it's ready to reproduce. A lot of students think it looks more like an infinity sign. This will appear on your cell when you have enough food to reproduce, but will also appear on other cells when they have enough food. If you asexually reproduce while they're ready, they will divide as well, increasing your population even more.
Now, the size of your population is important because if you die, as we'll demonstrate in the next level, and there's another member of your population still alive, you get control of that cell. If you die as the last member of your population, your cell line has been completely eliminated and you have to start the level over. That means starting from scratch with that balanced cell and losing all your progress. So it's good to have a large population. This is also part of why students need to balance choices between asexual and sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction gives students more control over how their cell changes across generations, adapts to the environment more quickly, but asexual reproduction increases the population more. So both are advantageous, but in different ways.
When they're finished, students can click the next level button and they'll be moved to level 1. They start off with 2 cells, one controlled by the computer and one that they can control. Predators are now present and food will be more spread out, so the characteristics that students select for their cells will probably change. Let's walk through all the things floating around this level that you or your students will see as they explore. First is the dust particle. These are just obstacles that get in your way while you're swimming around, and you can run into them without getting hurt.
Now these white cloud-looking areas are patches of thick mucus from some other creature, and they actually slow down your cell as you swim through. Over here is a black area, and this is a patch of nicotine residue, and notice it affects the direction your cell swims. Nicotine interferes with the cilia that Tetrahymena use to swim, affecting its ability to swim where it wants. These are the 2 hazards, and hazard resistance will make your cell less affected by these areas.
Beyond the hazards, there are also predators lurking around. The easiest to avoid are the sun animals or heliozoans. They can't move much, but are surrounded by pseudopods that will pull you in and eat you if you touch them, so don't do that. Another predator is Euplodes. It's another free-swimming cell, so it'll chase you if you're nearby. Like you, it has to eat with its oral apparatus, so it's sometimes possible to escape close calls.
Finally, there's the Cyclops. These are still tiny creatures, but they're about 1,000 times the size of Tetrahymena, as you can see. They'll just filter feed and don't even notice you. Also, while they can eat you, they can also eat your other predators. And they're so big that they'll knock dust particles out of their way as they swim, changing the environment as they go through it. This area that looks kind of like the nicotine residue is actually the edge of the body of water that Tetrahymena is in. You can't go through it, and its appearance is actually based on what the edge of a water droplet looks like in a microscope. As a reminder, the object of the game is to create as many successful cells as possible, so students should try to eat as much food as they can and reproduce as often as possible while avoiding predators and being mindful which traits will help them survive. The other thing to note about this is that there are 2 levels. Now, these aren't meant to be more or less difficult, but to favor different traits. So not only are there trade-offs to be made with one environment between investing in speed at the cost of maneuverability, but if speed helps more in one level and maneuverability is more important in the other, that means speed is advantageous in one environment and detrimental in another. As a final note, if the odd random glitch happens, your first defense is to return to the main menu and restart the level. Think of it as rebooting.
We hope you have fun and that your students learn a lot by playing this game.
If you have any questions or comments on the game, please feel free to contact us at this email address.